Thanks for checking out what's in the box. Hopefully you'll like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Today we'll be taking a look at Hot Toys 6 Scale It Chapter 2 Pennywise. This figure was pre-ordered early 2019 maybe. It's been so long I can't even remember. It's been a long wait. That I do remember. And it was one of my most anticipated Hot Toys releases. To be honest with you, I love these movies. I never really watched the original miniseries. I do love Tim Curry, and I did eventually watch it. And I thought it was pretty decent. It just wasn't my thing. It really wasn't horror to me. But of course, Curry did an amazing job in the part. And in turn, I think Bill Skarsgård did a great job as well for the Pennywise he was portraying for those Andy Muschietti movies. Now, I did watch both of those back to back just to refamiliarize myself with the character and to sort of sort out whether or not the second movie was up to par with the first. When I originally saw it in the theaters, I was kind of iffy about it. It just didn't feel right. But then again, I hadn't seen the first movie in quite some time. Watching them back to back, I'm sorry, I'm gushing a little because I really do love them, and I feel like they match up quite well in that scenario. When you're able to sit down and watch one night and watch another the next night, they really do flow together, and I didn't really expect it that much after my viewing in the theater. But anyway, let's break down this figure for you and show you exactly what's in the box. I wanted to start with the accessories because there are just so many of them. The hands alone are just ridiculous. For the price point, $270, that's a great deal for this figure and the accessories you get. I will quickly run through these hands as fast as I can, but you have plenty of gesturing options, including a grabbing hand for Georgie's arm, a palm out as if he's offering you something. You have a more closed palm as well. Two fists, which I don't know, he never really punched anyone, did he? A pointing finger, which I love, and then you have, I believe, another pointer or similar to that. It's on the figure currently, but it's a more unfurled hand gesture. And then of course you have the balloon holding hand here, which has a nice little hole for the balloon peg, if you want to call it that. I'll set that aside because we'll use it. And then we have two werewolf hands. These are in fact werewolf hands. He transforms one of his hands in the first movie. The one thing that Hot Toys missed on those was any kind of sculpted fur, but it's very hard to see in the film. I had to freeze frame it to actually see that it was more of a werewolfy, hairy hand than what you saw here. And then, of course, you have Georgie's arm. Now, this will come into play a little bit later, but to be quite honest with you, this arm is huge. It's meant to be the arm of probably a 7 or 8-year-old Georgie. And it's actually the same size as Pennywise's arm, which I feel is just a little meh. I don't really care for that, but it does have a nice coloration, and it's nice and bloody and has little pop marks in the areas where chunks were taken out. The meat of the arm is okay. It's a little not realistic. You would have expected to see maybe some bone or something like that, or maybe strings of cartilage further out, but no go there. Still pretty cool accessory. I'll set that out as well. We'll shove these hands aside because we won't really be needing those afterward. Now, solid on the accessory wise is the balloon. This is quite well done. I love that it's transparent. I love that you can see that it's tied off here. I think it's quite perfect. And then you have what is a wire strung through the balloon, and this is coated with a textured material. It's done well, and it gives off the impression of a string, but I have seen stuff like this fray before, and so you want to be really careful when you put that in his balloon hand. As you can see, it's a seriously tight fit, but you can push it through. But I will tell you right now, I have seen this material before, I believe over certain wiring for, I don't know, insulation and stuff like that, and it does fray. So if you want this balloon in his hand, do it once and leave it in the hand and just set the hand aside with the balloon in it, because the more you repeat that process, it's going to compress this material here, and eventually it's just going to wear right off. So do it as little as possible. But I do love the balloon. I kind of wish it had the I love dairy in it, but I'm not exactly sure why they didn't include that. It's in balloons in both film, actually. So, but yeah, great little accessory. You move on to the Jack in the Box, and that's really cool. I don't believe this was in the second film. It was in the first. Hot Toys put this out, and they really sort of made it an all-in-one figure, even though it says It Chapter 2. There are specific accessories to both, but movies kind of collide in that way anyway. I don't remember this appearing in part 2, but it does appear in part 1. The Jack is removable, and it's quite nicely detailed. It's fairly dark in color. I'm not sure if that's completely accurate to the film, but it does have that creepy old kind of look to it. The same with the box, which even has a Pennywise face in it. And the lid, of course, closes. It has a few stars there. Pop the lid back open and place the clown inside. And this does turn. Be very careful with this. I don't feel like it would last if you were cranking it like a real Jack in the Box. Following that up, this is a very specific It Chapter 2 skateboard. There is a kid that lives in Georgie's old house, Bill's old house, and he has a skateboard, and he runs into Bill, and this is quite well done for Hot Toys. There's nice little hex head bolts in there. There's a pattern on this. No real texture. Well, yeah, there's a little bit of texture, I'll say. Yeah, it does have a kind of skateboard texture to it. And then on the back side are the bloody wheels and all this. This is found by Bill in the hotel. It pops down a few steps, and then he rolls it over to see that the wording that says won't be there for him either, which is reference to that kid dying as well in the film. Solid there. We have, of course, Georgie's paper boat. It's done well. You can even read, it's even legible, SS Georgie on that. And they gave it a slicker look. It's meant to look kind of like it was wet in the water, and they also put wax on it so it would float. There's a little mist area here of paint on mine, but that may not be on everything. It's colored correctly. It just doesn't have the gloss. Of course, you can set that in the water, which is a really cool effect. And then, of course, we have the extra head. Now, I'm not going to go into massive details about this particular head because I'll do that with the full review of the figure. But the hair shape is nicely done. Of course, most of our six scale collectors would want rooted hair for a character like this, but it would be so difficult to do. I did a custom Pennywise at one point and did the hair, and it was a fairly tough job. As far as details and all this, I won't get into them. As I said, I'll do that with the other figure, but the teeth here are quite cool, and this is sort of a mid-teeth transformation before he opens his maw up. To be honest, I would have rather had that head. I would have liked to have had a Deadlights head, which would have been super awesome to have a little light up feature and see those lights down his throat. I'd have much rather that head than this one. But it's still a really cool accessory when you want to use it. Now, when we get down to the base, here's where I start to take issue. This is nothing like the scene we see in the film. Well, it is and it isn't. They did include a really cool feature where you could pop this extra head inside. The problem is with that, you have a little felt backing in here to kind of keep the head from scratching and stuff. The problem is it's terribly done. It's not glued in there quite well. It's cut awkwardly. And I mean, it'll be fine for what it's meant for, but I would have liked to have seen a nicer touch there. But you can pop the head in there. You can pop the base on top. Press down and lock it into place. And of course you get that view of his eyes peeking through the sewer grate here. Or the drainage grate. Now, where I take issue is actually the drainage grate, the concrete curb, the look of the curb all the way around. First off, I've never seen black concrete. Sorry. Unless it's painted that way, it doesn't exist in my world. And as you can see, around this grate is black concrete with just a slight gray speckle. There's nothing else to it. Concrete is gray. Even when it's wet, it's just a darker gray. It's never really black. And if it's black where you're from, you got a problem. But gray concrete doesn't exist. There's also no texture to the concrete whatsoever. And this follows through around the whole back half. It's just straight painted black with speckles of gray. Very few speckles, to be honest with you. And it doesn't really portray concrete the way it should be. To be honest, this grate that they did looks more concrete than the concrete around the grate. And therein lies another problem. They got the grate wrong. Yeah, the shape's fine. It's okay. Overall, they got the patina all right. It should be sort of mottled and weird looking, but if they were remotely paying attention to the film, this grate is completely rusted. So it should be oranges and browns and stuff like that, and they just didn't do it. So it doesn't quite capture accurately the scene, but it is what it is, and people will like it anyway, most likely. The grass also doesn't look quite as wet as the surrounding area, and I would have at least liked to have seen a satin color there, just a satin clear coat of some kind. Not nearly as glossy as the curb. Now, the one thing they got really well is the water. The water is spectacular. It even has a transparent look to it, and you can see where Georgie's blood is swirling down the grate. Really, really well done there. And of course, you can put the boat going there, or you could put Georgie's little arm, well, not so little arm, in there as well. So yeah, it's an extremely great variety of accessories. I think it's quite awesome in that regard. But quality over quantity. I would have liked to seen more accuracy in a handful of things. So now I can do a bit of a figure breakdown for you here, and I think articulation is the easiest thing to start with. I've had a handful of Hot Toys over the years, and various ones have limited articulation due to either clothing, armor, weaponry, and so on. Luckily, in this case, although the tailoring is beautiful, it is quite accurate tailoring wise. It doesn't limit articulation really whatsoever. So I'll show you here that obviously he has an up and down motion to the boots, which is really nice. Also side to side on both. Of course, rotation as well. He has really good double jointed knees, and you can hear those click as you move them. Of course, articulation in the hip. There's a twist in the thigh as well. Moving up from there, you have all the normal articulation of a Hot Toy. Back and forth motion of the wrist. You can turn it 360 as well. Of course, elbows. And these are a nice double jointed elbow, and you can get that arm really close to the body there, which is spectacular. Move it out, and of course you have perfect straight across motion in both arms, no problem whatsoever. You can of course rotate those under these sleeves here, and then he does have articulation in the waist. It's kind of limited in the chest, but that's, I mean, look at that. It's not really a problem when you've got that much waist movement. He can go as far down as that, far back as that. Really, really nice. The body's done well, and it matches the actor quite a bit. And then, of course, you have all the typical motion of a Hot Toys head, which is a double jointed neck, jointed at the collarbone and jointed at the neck, or well, the chin, basically. So you can turn him 360 if you wanted and get a little exorcist action going there. And he can look up and down quite well. So really nice on the articulation. And of course you have all those options for display, and you can put him in multiple poses. Now, as I mentioned, the tailoring is virtual perfection. Whoever sewed these, whatever group was responsible for that, they really did get a lot of the details correctly. I did a lot of research on this costume early on because long before Hot Toys announced theirs, I thought I would do a custom figure run. And luckily that never happened, and Hot Toys did their thing, and it's a sight to see. It has all the little pleats and furls and, you know, everything you could think of, even the fringe underneath the wrist areas and the ankles. These little beaded balls here that hang off at those same areas. It's a double or a triple twist twine that has multiple colors in there, mixed with gray and red and a cinnamon color. That matches the film's costuming perfectly. The same with this sort of corset feel here and the puffs there. If I were to pick at it even a little bit, maybe these are a little too large, but that could be a matter of futzing and making them look a little smaller on certain sides. So not really a major issue. This little neck piece here is so awesome. I think people have mentioned in other reviews that it went all the way up to his chin. Yes, it kind of did. And I think you're only missing 2 or 3 more of these little fringes to make that work. But it's not a deal breaker. It's not like a major thing. You can, obviously, I've have these fluffed up here, and it's almost matches the neck completely. It's just a matter of futzing. Maybe you don't really have to go so far as to change or cut anything loose from this. As you can see, that's pretty close, and you could hide that even more. Just keep working it and making sure it kind of lifts up in the appropriate areas to make that look a little better. Now, big problem I have with the tailoring. Well, it's not the tailoring so much as it is the material and what they did with the material. This is a very parachute pantsy kind of material, and it's not at all what was used in the film. Tailoring good, material, it replicates the look, sure, but what was used in the film was a silk combination, if I remember correctly. And this doesn't have that sheen of silk or that look. If you'll notice in certain scenes in the film, the costume almost looks slick. It's not from being wet. It's not from anything other than it's a silk material. And in certain lighting, it really does show that sheen to it. It's almost silvery when it's not being gray. And so they kind of missed the mark there. And I would have loved it to be a bit more accurate. It would have had a cool look, but maybe, just maybe, the sheen or the shine to that material would have given it an even more toy-like look, and most people wouldn't have been happy with that. Now, the other big issue I have is absolutely no weathering whatsoever. None. That's a really big problem because this character spends the majority of his time in a sewer, in a well, and in the water. Like, it's clearly not that great to have just a completely clean outfit. But then I think back, and I can't really remember many figures where they actually bothered to weather the clothing. I'm not giving them a pass. Not at all. But maybe this is just not something that's in Hot Toys' wheelhouse. I'll pop up a screen cap here or a photo showing the sheen to this and sort of the dirty look to it. It was really heavily weathered down towards the ground, around his belt, but it had weathering all over. And I would have liked to have seen Hot Toys take a chance on this figure and do that kind of weathering to this. I think it would have been really awesome. I have seen some people do some custom weathering, but yeah, it would have been great to have a fully weathered material from this figure. Now on to the head. I will point out the obvious, like many others have. Because of the fluffs of the body and all of this, and because of the sculpt, he doesn't have that bloated head look that he has in the film. I don't know if they were trying to minimize this just to keep the figure from looking a little awkward, or if they just completely avoided that look. The truth is, his head is, funnily enough, balloon shaped. It starts kind of at a pointed angle at the chin, and it goes up and it gets big. It also is reminiscent of sort of the body of a spider, where they have that sort of bloated tail end, and it makes sense for the character. Now, in my opinion, it's fairly bigger than a human head, but it probably needed to be increased in size by about 20%. I'll show that in a photo as well. Now, when you get down and dirty into the details of this head, what do I think? I think it's accurate to the character for the most part. I say that because I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of this and into the details of this, because my having an artistic eye, my being an artist myself, me being an artist myself, sorry about that, I catch on to some of these things, and of course the shape of the head is the main thing. Luckily that doesn't throw the likeness off too much. It's just more in the nitpick range. However, the way they painted this was similar to what they did with their Arkham Asylum video game Joker. They did a straight white paint job and then a little bit of gray airbrushing, and that's it. The truth is, this needed to be painted like a human face, but only in grays and whites. So what's missing here is the freckling of the skin, the modeling of the skin, which was apparent in the makeup. There's also a worn look to it, as though even though he's a creature and even though he's mimicking a clown of some type, there was almost a human element where down around the neck, the makeup was kind of fading. The same is a little bit in the eyes as well. And they completely missed this. They specifically missed the freckling in the face, which was a big deal and would have added to sort of the dimension of the figure. Another thing is all these cracks along the forehead and along the cheeks had their own amount of detailing. It was just a gray wash essentially, but it made those pop out against the white makeup. And it doesn't really do this here when they just kind of did a quick gray airbrush and we're done with it. It helps some, but it's not as clear as it is in the film. Now, there was also an underlying texture to his skin. It's kind of odd to describe other than just being a simple texture, but it was as if, you know how clowns would put on pancake makeup and stuff and they sponge it on. Sometimes they paint it on, but if you sponge it on, it leaves this stippling behind, and that's not there either. Another couple little nitpicks, I guess if you would call it, is that there are variations in the color of the red paint in his nose and along his face. Those have cracks in them, or there's lighter reds and darker reds included in that, and that's not in this as either. Well, the last thing I will pick at is around the eyes. Yes, they're kind of a smoked eye, but just on the outer edges of that is sort of a purple coloring. It's very light, but it's there, and it just kind of adds more dimension and extra detail to the makeup. And they just didn't have that or include it, which, you know, with production pieces, maybe that's the case. Maybe I should go back and look at the prototype photos, but yeah, they missed the mark painting this head, but overall, other than the balloon head shape, it's fairly accurate. Either way, I'm happy to have this figure. I'm happy to see it in my collection, especially when you throw it on this base. Now, I would be careful with this because that will mess up your tailoring. I also obviously wish this would have been a shorter pole to this peg. As is, you have to kind of lean it back and push him forward and down to get it to work appropriately. But I can't wait to pose him and have a few accessories there and do something really wild and wicked with him, and, you know, maybe do a little Pennywise the dancing clown and whatever you want to do with the character. But again, I do enjoy this figure a lot, but there are problems that could have been solved if they'd have put in that extra effort into making this an even more fantastic release. So where does this figure land in my rating system? Well, as I've mentioned before, we use 3 steps to verify how good a figure really is. That would be appearance, accessories, and articulation. Not in that particular order, but that's what we go by. Looking at this, we have to talk about accessories. There are plenty of them. You can include the extra head, the base in that. They're virtually never ending. This is definitely a deluxe level figure. But it's generally quality over quantity. And I do have to kind of ding them for a somewhat inaccurate base. The oversized Georgie arm, it seriously is as big as one of Pennywise's arms, which is just odd. And of course, if you want to include the extra head, the lack of paint therein. So, despite the amount of accessories you get, I'm probably going to hit this pretty hard and rate accessories at a 3. That's tough for a Hot Toys figure, but man, yeah. You expect a good deal of accuracy in these things, and it was just lacking in a few key components. But again, plenty of accessories to use. Now, when it comes to appearance, well, it looks great. I mean, it's a fantastic figure. It has amazing shelf presence, as you can see. The posability is off the charts. There's a lot that adds to its presence and its appearance as a figure. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing just the tailoring alone. I'll say that. But then I'll begrudgingly give this a 4. It might have been a 3, but there's just so much to this figure that adds to that appearance. Not just the sculpt or not just the paintwork. Yes, the head should have been bigger. The face should have had more detail. It should have had modeling and cracking of the makeup and all that good stuff. And the clothing should have been weathered. Extremely weathered. So yeah, I do knock it down a point for that, just simply because there could have been a little bit more. I wouldn't have minded if they'd charged a little more and gave us a bit more detail in the figure. But that didn't happen, so I'm sticking with a begrudged 4. Articulation, what can I say? Knocks it out of the park. Amazing job. I don't know if this was a new specific body or additions to an old body, but you really can pose him almost however you would like him to pose. You could pick up any number of his poses from the film and likely achieve those, except for one. You're not going to be able to cram him in a little 6-scale refrigerator and have him unwind and walk towards you. That's not going to cut it. But he can pose in just about anything else. And so I'm especially giving Articulation a 5. So yeah, that's my review of Hot Toys It Chapter 2 Pennywise. I thank you for sticking through that one. It was probably a long one. We'll see in the editing process. But I do think there's no regrets in picking this up, despite the complaints I had. Look, you're not going to get this figure anywhere else in this scale at this price point. This is a pre-pandemic price point of $270 for a figure that's not even classified as a deluxe, which is insane to me, unless I'm completely wrong and it is a deluxe, but I don't remember it being tagged as a deluxe. And so for that purpose and for that price point, you're not going to get any better. And you could make those minor changes if you wanted to. You could do a little bit with the paintwork on the sculpt if you had that ability. And most people can do weathering if you just take the time, learn a few tutorials here and there. I've seen quite a few people do it on the forums that did pick up this figure. But yeah, I do stand behind the figure, but I also stand behind the complaints that I had. They don't ruin the experience for me. That's just my eye for detail, and this is completely a collector's figure and something that most everyone would enjoy. I'm going to proudly display him back behind me at some point, and you will likely see him and his poses change regularly. But I'll stop rambling at this point. I love the figure. Could it have been better? Yes. Could you get better? No. So if you get a chance, pick this up through Sideshow or other retailers. But as always, I'll catch you next time.